Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome to day one of the Grant Writing for Every Occasion workshop sponsored by YSHRAB, the Wyoming State Archives, and the Wyoming State Library. For those joining us, my name is Sarah Davis, and I am the Wyoming State Archivist and the Wyoming SHRAB Coordinator. I am moderating the sessions today and tomorrow and will be monitoring the chat. You can send me, put your chat in the chat box or go ahead and send me direct messages today. We just completed session 1, getting started. We will be getting sessions 2, what's the problem and who are you? This session will be held from 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. this morning and includes a discussion of beneficiary need and organizational credibility. Coming up at 11 a.m. is session 3, what will you do about it? This will be a discussion of objectives, methods, and evaluation. This workshop is brought to you by the Wyoming State Historical Records Advisory Board and the Wyoming State Library. It is supported in part by an award from YSHRAB through funding from the National Historic Publications and Records Commission, which is a division of the National Archives and Records Administration. The YSHRAB program is administered by the Wyoming State Archives, which is part of the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. The presenter for today's workshops is Susan Mark. Susan Mark is the outreach librarian at the Wyoming State Library. Susan is one of 2 coordinators for the Wyoming State Library's Federal Library Service and Technology Act grants from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. She's written grants successfully for nonprofits and state government agencies, managed grant contracts, served on grant review committees, and conducted grant writing workshops. With that, I will turn it over to Susan.
This session is on need and organizational credibility, so let's get started. And for those in the first session, I told you you'd get sick of this slide, but the logic of a grant is that people in your community need something, and you have a plan. You're the perfect organization to fix this if you could only secure the funds, and your grantor is going to have those funds. Now, often when we go back to the components of a grant proposal, the first 2 are the introduction or the organizational credibility, and then there's the need, also could be called the problem or the situation. And often the introduction goes first, but we are going to start talking with the need. And why is that? Because I believe the need drives every piece of your grant proposal. Unless there is a problem in the world that needs to be fixed, that is affecting people's lives, there is no need for the project, there is no need to prove you can do it, and there's no reason to put money into it. So with that, a need or a problem is the people you serve are hurting, lacking something they need. There is something going wrong in their lives that only you can fix. It is not one of the big pitfalls with grant writing. It's not the lack of your program. It's not that kids lack a after-school program so you are going to put on an after-school program to fix their lack of after-school program. That's perfectly circular reasoning. Your need is going to be that the children have no place to go, that they need some enriching experiences, those sorts of things. It's also not anything your organization needs. I want you to realize that your organization doesn't need a thing. You can have basketball-size holes in your roof and you don't need a roof. The people you serve need you to have that roof. So, what makes a good needs statement? We already touched on this. It's beneficiary-focused. Never start with that, you need shelves, you need this, you need that. Always start with, the library is the only source of public access internet computer in your community, and therefore you will leave out what your organization wants to do with that, because that's going to be your methods. That's going to be in your budget. So make it very clear who is in need, and it's not you. It's compelling. It answers the question, so what? Oftentimes we are so passionate about things, we forget we need to convince others. Worked with Creative Aging, which has done some wonderful programs in our libraries. And the so what with them is that without enriching experiences, the elderly can experience, older adults can experience social isolation, can worsen dementia. So that's a definite so what. When you're talking summer reading, it's not just that kids need to read books over the summer. It's that kids that don't experience summer slide, it sets them back academically. When you start talking about children losing academic performance, then you've got a definite so what. It's urgent. The problem's happening now, and you're going to be addressing it during the grant period. Very detailed, very specific. So what age group? What geographic area? Which of underserved groups in your population you're serving might be affected. So very detailed, very specific about what is going on. It's supported by both hard and soft data. You do not want any unsupported assumptions in your needs statement. You want to have numbers backing you up. You want to have comments from people, testimonials backing you up. You want to have those sorts of things to say, this is a need. We don't just think it's out there. We know it's out there for these reasons. It needs to be important, but it needs to be solvable. You're not gonna solve literacy in the entire country with a set of library shelves, but you are going to be able to expand, for example, your books for people who are just learning English. You are going to be able to do something like that. So whatever the need is, focus it on what you plan to solve, or at least take concrete steps to solve during this grant period. Has to be desired by the target population. I worked on a project where we wanted to put in some services for the visually impaired at our local library. And then we asked a group of people who were visually impaired, and they said, no, this doesn't work for us. This is not what we need. So this is where your reach into the community, your knowledge of the people you serve is going to come in really handy, because it's got to be something that there is the desire on their part to have. And then it serves your mission and your funder's mission. It has got to match the priorities of both you and your funder. So ideally, both you and the funder, you want to see the same change in the world. You see the same problems that need to be fixed. So the 6 W's, do we all remember these from grade school? Who needs help? And again, very specific. What is their problem? What problem do they have? What's going wrong in their lives? And why is this even a problem? Is this really a problem? Have you answered so what? Where is this happening? When is this happening? Is it when people do this happens and it's going wrong? Is it taking place at certain times of the year? When is this going on? And the answer to a lot of your grant projects is it's going to be going on right now. When we dealt with some COVID projects, it was, well, since the pandemic started, it has exacerbated this. So there's a case of when is it happening? And how do you know? And that goes back to your hard data, your soft data, all of your assumptions, that rather than just throwing them out there, because truly a lot of times you know what the need is, you feel strongly about it, but if you don't back it up, you don't have a strong grant proposal. You really have to show that something is going wrong, and you know it's going wrong, and it's not just you think it's going wrong. So what goes into a strong needs statement? It answers those 6 W's. It's clear and it's concise. This goes back to, in the first session, for those of you who weren't there, I have 3 rules for grant writing. You have to make sense, follow directions, and keep in touch with your funder. This goes into the make sense in terms of being clear. And concise is going to be an element really of your entire proposal. When you waste space on things that are sort of tangential, when you use too many words, you are not giving yourself adequate space to really truly make your case. So you want to be very concise about it. You want this to be punchy. It flows logically, goes back to it makes sense. It's going to appeal to both the intellect and the emotions. Now, there are some parallels with grant writing, with fundraising appeal writing. One of the big difference is with fundraising appeals, you usually stick to the emotions. You usually don't start throwing in statistics. For a grant proposal, you are going to want those statistics. You are going to want to have something that people can dig, the reviewers can dig into to say, yes, this is going to affect this many people. But you want a little heart tugging in it. And if you're writing about a problem that really matters, it will have a little bit of heart tugging. And it engages the reader. It's something that's very readable. Now, I put this further reading in the resources folder. Strongly recommend this resource as you're looking in need. And again, I believe that nothing is more important in your grant proposal than getting the need right. The Harvest Foundation's Need Statement Toolkit is an excellent resource. So when you're done with this session or done with the whole workshop, be sure to go into that link, print it off, and look at it, review it. It's very good resource. Then we are going to go to a breakout. If you are watching this as a recording, please pause the recording and get your pen and notebook out and write down your answers. I want you to talk over your need statements, your needs with each other, and ask yourself, is it truly a beneficiary-focused need and not focused on either the needs of your organization or the lack of the project? And is it important enough to answer, so what? I see we have some folks from room 1 coming back. Did you have any takeaways from your discussion you want to share in chat? That's a good one, Melissa. Underlining the immediacy. That's a very good one. I think we have people back. If there were some takeaways from your discussion you'd like to put in the chat box, please do. I'd love to hear what you have to say, what you talked about. Suzanne, yes, that's a big one. The added urgency due to the isolation from the virus. Attending webinars that grantors hold, that's a really good one, Cynthia. That lets you know what their priorities are. Compelling without complaining. Oh, that is a great way to put it. Yes, use numbers might not be directly library related, but show the community need. There are some, we will talk about that later. Visual story, I like that. Yeah, the so what can be hard. It really can be hard. And people don't value things like the arts, and that's where you need to convince them. And again, I've found that oftentimes people are so passionate about what they're doing that they forget to persuade others. They forget that they really need to find what goes. Need to get seniors involved in library communities. Yes, Lisa, include if you're addressing needs for marginalized or underserved populations. We will talk a little bit about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and a lot of that is making sure your underserved populations, that you are truly serving everyone in your community. So let's move on and talk about why need statements go wrong, because they do. The biggest one I see is organization focused, not beneficiary focused. The second biggest one is lack of the solution, the project. Again, lack of summer reading is not your need. Lack of reading opportunities, summer slide, academic performance is your need. So, and it's hard not to jump to that because we're all excited about our projects, right? So this is essentially saying the same thing, mixes in other proposal components, stay very laser focused on what you're communicating in each section of the grant proposal. You really don't have the interest from the target population. They don't see it as a need. It's unsupported by data. You have put in a lot of unsupported assumptions in there. Vague about who will benefit. Again, be very specific about whose lives are going to be improved by this. It's not important. You haven't answered, so what? And on the flip side, it's overwhelming or even hopeless. When you write a grant proposal, come from a position of strength. You are a strong organization that does this. You see a distinct need, and you can actually do something about this problem. So if it sounds overwhelming, it's not going to be a strong proposal. So talking about data, and there are data sources in your resource list. Oftentimes, if you're in a library, the state library is a very good source. Other state level agencies, Wyoming has an economic analysis division, but one of the things is your official sources, such as the US Census. If you're dealing with young people, Kids Count Data Center has great stuff. Institute of Museum and Library Services does an annual survey of all public libraries. You might have done a formal or informal needs assessment locally, which will probably incorporate some of the other things on this list. You might have done surveys or questionnaires, and if you don't get enough of me in this workshop over the next 2 days, we do have in the resources list a link to a video series I did on making good surveys a few years ago. You might have done focus groups. You might just have gathered comments and testimonials. We do a school survey every year, and when I was doing it, a lot of the comments said, these statewide databases you fund, we couldn't live without them. We wouldn't have scholarly resources for the kids to do their work with. So, or you might have done discussions with key stakeholders. So all of these things, if you have them in hand, so you look at the need, use them to bolster that need. So moving on to organizational credibility. And when you go into that job interview and they ask you the dreaded first question, tell me a little bit about yourself, that's what this is. So, and this goes back to our grant logic. Why are you the perfect organization to solve this problem? So why are you perfect? You've got a track record of success. You've maybe have done similar projects and had good evaluations from prior grant projects. You have a capable board and staff, and here's where your key staff, board, volunteer, resumes, and bios are going to bolster it. But you have knowledge on hand, you have capability on hand. You have strong community support and strong community reach. You know your community. And not only that, but your community knows and supports you. And this is where oftentimes the in-kind portion of your budget is really showing that. Because if you are providing in-kind that is coming from individual fundraising, that is coming from local community organizations, you are showing that the community wants you and they are supporting you in very concrete ways. But you know what? We're doing this grant because we need a little bit more to do what we want. You have experience working with the beneficiaries, and this is part of what you've talked about in your need, is that you know what they need, and you know how to work with them, and you know how to communicate with them. As I said, the track record of success, experience with similar projects. Maybe you've even partnered with another organization on a similar project and not done it yourself, but you have the experience. You're fiscally responsible, you are transparent. When you submit all your numbers, those will all be in order. And this one really is something that has come to the forefront in the past few years. is that commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, that you are making sure you reach everyone in your community. And as you work on this organizational credibility statement, you want to not get bogged down in boring, non-critical details. They do not need to hear the entire history of your organization. They do need to know you've been in existence this long. This is why you came into existence, those sorts of things. But again, always make it kind of punchy. So basically, what it boils down to is, will you get the job done, change the world, and not waste their money? It's all it boils down to. So, and I glanced over, I saw a question about the presentation slides. Yes, they are in that resources folder. You will have access to them. So as you do your organizational credibility, why does your organization even exist? And how long have you been operating? This is one that, if you're a newer organization, can be a little tricky, but it doesn't rule out that you'll be able to get funding. Just means you may have to play to other strengths other than your history. If you had the elevator speech, what would you most like people to know about your organization? What problems out there do you solve? What's the relevant experience that you've talked about? What's your relationship with the intended beneficiaries? Are you reaching out to them in certain ways? Do they come into your building? What is your experience working with them? What community support do you have? Both volunteer, donations, people going to bat for you with the local decision makers. What are some of your past successes, and how did you know these were successful? That goes back to your evaluation components of your grant proposals, your evaluation components of any project, even if you don't do a grant proposal. And what is your commitment to serving every single person in your community and making sure people from traditionally marginalized or underserved communities don't get missed? So, Sarah, can we take a question or two before we move on?
Yep. We have a question from Ava Green. What if you're writing a grant about what you see that needs improvement, like a town park? Where do you draw the supportive data from?
Well, that's a very good question. I'm going to think on that. What you might look for is information regarding, I know that there are things out there dealing with quality of life and what kind of quality of life parks bring. You might be able to kind of look at similar communities and how many parks they have. But those are the sorts of things I would go looking for. How many kids in your community how many kids are there in your community for the Census Bureau that could use a playground in the park? But I do know there are typically, not sure which sources. If you're not a librarian, it's a good time to tap your local librarian. And if you are a librarian, go contact your state library in terms of data sources. But I think you would go looking for the quality of life aspects of parks. And I know that information is out there somewhere.
Ava, there is also a response from Lisa Scroggins saying if you are looking to improve a town park, you need to establish a partnership with the town leadership for the project. They should be able to help you provide the data about the use, etc. You could also do an on-site survey of the park users over a period of time. Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing that. Another question came from Rebecca Singleton. Is it helpful to provide information about the converse? What happens when the population remains underserved? For example, statistics regarding the prevalence of reading disabilities among the incarcerated.
That's a great question. And that is going to be part of your need. And that is definitely something that you want to include in your need. So, and I do see, is the credibility information part of the grant application? Yes, it is. It's if you are writing a free form proposal, and typically in an online application, you will be asked to say something about your organization. So let's go to a breakout. And actually, I'm going to grab one more question that just came in. Go-to metrics are really going to depend on what you're trying to prove. So it may be poverty levels, it may be disability, it could be a lot of things. That's really going to depend on the problem you're trying to solve. So let's go to breakout number 2. And I want you to kind of talk to each other and have them explain their organizational credibility. So kind of say, what other people can tell you that supports the idea that they are a capable organization that can complete a project. Okay, age of organization really does help. Yep, and if you're a newer organization, you're going to have to work with that. Yep, mission of a library. If you've got a strategic plan, you've got goals and objectives. Commitment of board, trustees. Yep, visibility matters. But yes, and that's something we talked about in session 1. Is your organization capable of pulling off the grant? So, but yep, again, this is your job interview question that everybody prepares for. Tell me a little bit about yourself. So, can you speak a little on how you show your commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion? That is something I'm not an expert in. I do know it's something that funders look for a lot more these days. A lot of organizations have created equity, diversity, and inclusion statements. You may want to include, some of the underserved populations, how you're going to include them. So those are some ways. But I would encourage you to seek out some training on that. I know the Wyoming State Library has a training calendar, and I have seen a few webinars on that topic to become more well-versed in that. Yeah, I pointed out, don't necessarily review based on writing quality, but even if you don't formally review it on writing quality, if it's easier to read, it's going to make a lot more sense. So how can credibility statements go wrong? As we just talked about in the questions and comments, it doesn't demonstrate you're capable of doing it. It doesn't relate to the proposal. And again, you will tweak every proposal, and because you do different things. Most organizations are not focused on one single thing. You've got a few different irons in the fire. And you want to make sure that what you're emphasizing as your strength is what the funder is looking for as a priority and the argument that you're trying to make with the whole proposal. So we mentioned before, it gets bogged down in unimportant details. Always remember to stay focused on what someone outside your organization would be interested in, not necessarily what matters to you. You're not showing you can reach the intended beneficiaries. You're not showing that you have community support. No track record of success. You can't point to other projects. And again, you're gonna have a challenge if you're a newer organization. And one of the things that you can always think about if you're in that boat is to look for a fiscal sponsor for a project and then build that track record of success. And then no commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. See a question? Yes, you are able to use chat and breakout sessions. I know some people have trouble with their microphones or cameras. So with that, questions, you can either put them in the chat box or you could raise your hand and Sarah will unmute you. Any questions on need, organizational credibility, anything before we break?
We have one question from Autumn. How do you keep from sounding repetitive?
Echo language, don't repeat it, is probably my best suggestion. To a certain extent, it's a balancing act. Because to some extent you do want to repeat yourself because you want to hammer home the important points in a grant proposal. One is echo language, but don't repeat it verbatim. Another one is to stay laser focused on laser focused on what each grant proposal component is trying to accomplish. So as you write the need, you want to leave the organizational credibility out of it. As you write the organizational credibility out of it, you want to leave the need out of it. You may want to say, we have reach with this population, but you're not repeating the actual need. So stay laser focused each component, keeping those components in their separate silos.
Susan, we have another question from Angie Bates. We recently finished a building project which was successful, but we left out a sound system. How do we ask for more when we just built and still show success?
Are you going back to the same funder or going to a different funder? And that's gonna, because different, okay. You brag about the wonderful building. You brag about what it's done for the community. And rather than say, oops, we forgot a sound system, we say, we can do this much more with a sound system that was not in our original project. So there's a certain element of writing where you pretend you meant to do it that way, as funny as that may sound. So yeah, you focus on the success. You said, we just finished this building. It's doing great things, but we can do even more with a sound system.
Great. We have another question from Ava Green. If you are writing a grant with multiple partners, do you focus on the credibility of each organization?
Yes, you do. I've worked on a grant where there were a couple of partners, and we did have something in about each partner's credibility. But that's going to mean you have to make your case faster, because you do only get so much space, oftentimes, whether it's one organization or 2 or 3 partners. So it means you have to distill it down even more, which is hard. The hardest thing in the world is to write short. We used to say in newspapers, I didn't have time to write a short story, so I wrote a long one. So, but yes, the short answer is yes, you do want to show the credibility of every partner on, when we are talking collaborative grants. Now, if you just have a partner who's providing a letter of support and doing some, maybe some promotion, maybe offering a little bit of in kind, you don't necessarily have to go in that. But if you have someone who's really, they're in it completely on this grant with you, yes, you do want to show the credibility of each.
Our next session will begin at 11 a.m. And the topic is, what will you do about it?